On this fine Monday, a lot to talk about today. Thank you for watching Outnumbered and Outnumbered Overtime. And ahead of this White House briefing, of course, one of the topics that may come up is the recertification or not of the Iran deal. Sarah Sanders, White House press secretary, yet to step up to the podium there. We'll take it live when it happens. I'm Harris. Here's Dana.
Fox News Alert, you're looking live inside the White House briefing room where Sarah Sanders is set to answer questions as Rudy Giuliani keeps up his defense of President Trump. Hello, everyone. I'm Dana Perino, and this is the Daily Briefing. Also on tap this week, lawmakers on Capitol Hill preparing for the confirmation hearing for the president's pick to lead the CIA. Here's Gina Haspel arriving moments ago on Capitol Hill. This after telling the White House she was willing to step aside before facing tough questions from the Senate Intelligence Committee on Wednesday. The new U.S. ambassador to Germany defending Haspel on Fox and Friends this morning.
This is about politics. This is nothing more than them trying to undermine this process and just take a scalp, so to speak. She is very qualified. She's risen up the ranks. I was just out at the CIA. They're excited to have her.
Chief Intelligence Correspondent Catherine Herridge joins us live. Catherine, this is a pretty big deal up there on Capitol Hill.
Well, it is absolutely, Dana, and good afternoon. The first woman nominated to be CIA director has arrived on Capitol Hill just a short time ago to try and win over those who are the holdouts in the Senate and to also meet with Democrats, including Dianne Feinstein, Senators Heinrich and Joe Manchin. Senator Feinstein is important because she led an investigation into the CIA program in 2014, and it became so acrimonious that Democrats accused the CIA of spying on Senate investigators. Haspel is also expected to meet, as I mentioned, with Senators Heinrich and Manchin. The ACLU told Fox at the end of last week that even a minimal support role in the controversial interrogation program that included the waterboarding of self-described architect of 9/11, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, would disqualify her.
The biggest concern we have with her is that in the entire history of the United States Senate, as far as we know, the Senate has never confirmed somebody with an operational role in the use of torture. That would be a first. It's a new low for the country if she gets confirmed.
It's important, I think, to give folks at home some context. Former CIA Director John Brennan was a top decision maker for this controversial interrogation program, and he was confirmed by the Senate as CIA Director under President Obama. Gina Haspel, at that time, was a mid-level manager at CIA and had no say on policy.
I think Gina Haspel should be given the same shake that John Brennan was given, and that is it's fair for the committee to look into their records. It's fair for them to ask the tough questions, but ultimately they've got to let the facts guide their decision-making, and the decision-making is about whether this individual is qualified to lead that agency.
The way the vote is sort of stacking up at this point is that it's going to come down to a handful of senators. Rand Paul told us at the end of last week that he did not have a meeting set to meet with Haspel before Wednesday's confirmation hearing, but he was still open to that meeting if it's able to happen. Dana.
All right, Catherine, thank you.
You're welcome.
For more on this, I'm joined by John Yoo, former Deputy Assistant Attorney General in the George W. Bush administration. And John, I'm glad you're here today because, like a bad penny, this issue of the legal underpinnings of the enhanced interrogation program comes up over and over again, especially when people want to make political points. And if you just bear with us and explain to us once again the legal underpinnings and how the Justice Department came to that decision.
Well, first, I want to make clear, Gina Haspel's not a lawyer. It's not her job to come to legal conclusions about the meaning of the anti-torture statute or the president's powers under the Constitution. She's one of those men and women out in the field who protected this country right after we were knocked down on the onto the mat after 9/11, and she did carry out a very difficult job. At the Justice Department, we were the ones who have the job to figure out what do the laws require. And the way we thought about it was Congress had written an ambiguous statute saying don't torture. And so we undertook weeks of legal research and writing opinions to define the lines where we said you can't go beyond these lines. You can interrogate short of those lines, but don't go beyond them. We were trying to make sure that Gina and people like that did not cross the line into torture, and I think we did that successfully. Now, I think she's being punished by armchair quarterbacks, Democrats in the Senate, or Rand Paul, Republican in the Senate. I couldn't think of a better way to get us back to the pre-9/11 mindset than to say we're going to prosecute you or we're going to punish you for carrying out your orders when we were asking you to be on the edge, on the envelope to stop another 9/11.
And John, isn't it true that there have been bipartisan and independent investigations into this, and there has been no decision to prosecute anyone?
Put aside what Catherine said about people being confirmed who already were involved in the same program, but Attorney General Holder appointed an independent counsel, much like Bob Mueller, to investigate all this. There were no charges brought against anybody because I think they saw that in the end, the statute that Congress passed that existed at the time of 9/11 was vague, and that we were trying to make sure we didn't violate the law.
Look at what President Trump said today on Twitter. He said, "My highly respected nominee for CIA director, Gina Haspel, has come under fire because she was too tough on terrorists. Think of that. In these very dangerous times, we have the most qualified person, a woman who Democrats want out because she is too tough on terror. Win Gina." One thing I wanted to ask you about, the reason that the CIA would come to the Justice Department for an opinion is so that they can be sure they are doing the right thing. We ask them to do very tough things. But what happens if then they have that legal approval and then they carry out the orders and then years later, decades later, they're prosecuted for that same work? I think that that would be devastating for the intelligence community.
I'm sure the ACLU and Rand Paul would like every CIA agent in the field to be a lawyer. I can't think of a better way to lose this war against terrorism. But the main point is we should actually encourage the CIA, when they have a hard question, to go to justice. They followed all the rules. Gina Haspel and her colleagues followed the rules. They came to us. They didn't wing it. They didn't go off on their own, off the reservation. The statute says you can't inflict severe pain and suffering. And we tried our best to figure out what that was so that the CIA would not violate that law.
And you stand by that original piece. The Obama administration changed things. Like even I think under President Bush, the standard was changed or whatever. So it's not like Gina Haspel would be overseeing a department that is going to reach back into a previous toolbox if things have already changed. I mean, that would be very irresponsible.
First of all, we shouldn't forget that we only use these on 3 people,
right,
including Khalid
Sheikh Mohammed.
Terrorists. Yeah, Khalid Sheikh Mohammed, who killed Danny Pearl,
right,
slit his throat on video, and was the mastermind of the 9/11 attacks. So it's only 3 people, and then we stopped. And then Congress passed a new law in 2008 clarifying what it meant. So the legal regime is completely different now. Gina Haspel's coming in as CI director, I hope, with different set of laws and rules. And so we aren't going to have to struggle like she and I and others did right after the 9/11 attacks to figure out what we could do.
In the last minute that I have you, can I just switch gears real quickly? And that is that, Rudy Giuliani made a lot of news over the weekend. He likes to be out there and being on offense. I just have one specific question for you, because I know your expertise is about the government, the way it's set up, the executive branch and its relation to others. What do you think the ruling would be from the Supreme Court about a president having to obey a subpoena from an independent counsel?
Once again, you're proving that you seem to have gone to law school because that is one of the great unresolved questions in the separation of powers. In the Watergate tapes case, the Supreme Court told President Nixon, you have to show up and obey a subpoena if it's issued by a criminal prosecutor. And Nixon voluntarily gave in at that point. I think for the good of the country, he didn't say, forget it, I don't have to obey a subpoena. That is still an unresolved question under constitutional law. Could a president say, another branch can't compel me to appear before it? Just like presidents have never testified before Congress.
Right.
A president has never appeared as a compelled witness in a criminal trial. Just like President Trump couldn't say, hey, you, Chief Justice Roberts, I want you in the Oval Office and explain to me this crazy Obamacare opinion you issued. All 3 branches are supposed to be independent and respect each other. So we don't know what would happen if a president said, I'm not going to obey a subpoena.
So that's kind of fun. Over 200 years old as a country, and we don't know the answer to that very basic question.
I think I'm going to put it on my next exam.
Well, okay, right. Well, students, you have a clue there. All right, John Yoo, thank you.
Thanks, Dina.
A big primary day for the GOP tomorrow as voters in 4 key battleground states head to the polls, including West Virginia. 3 Republicans vying for the chance to flip Senator Joe Manchin's seat. Now President Trump is weighing in, trying to take down one candidate, and Peter Doocy is live in Charleston, West Virginia. With that, Peter, this race is pretty interesting.
And Dana, President Trump did not endorse one candidate. He actually endorsed two people. He wrote this on Twitter. To the great people of West Virginia, we have together a really great chance to keep making a big difference. Problem is, Don Blankenship, currently running for Senate, can't win the general election in your state. No way. Remember Alabama. Vote Rep. Jenkins or A.G. Morrissey. Well, Congressman Evan Jenkins, who got half of the president's shout out there, says that he is grateful for what he's calling a shout out.
We're excited about the momentum. We're excited that President Trump gave us a shout out this morning. We feel really good. We had actually today a whole group of the Trump delegates to the National Convention announce their support for my candidacy. So we're on the move. We're on the home stretch. We're going to win tomorrow.
But Blankenship tells us that he rejects the president's comparison there to Alabama's failed Senate candidate, Judge Roy Moore.
He's getting bad information. You know, my accusers are Hillary Clinton and Barack Obama, not young women. So I think he's just getting the wrong story. And, you know, Mitch McConnell doesn't want me to be in the Senate because he knows that I believe we have to have new leadership there to actually drain the swamp.
Blankenship did go to jail for a year on a conviction for conspiring to violate mine safety laws. And because he's still on probation, a third candidate, the Attorney General Patrick Morrissey, is pointing out that Blankenship still has not filed a financial disclosure, and to see what that might mean, he called Blankenship's probation officer.
My campaign will be informing his probation officer in Nevada about this issue right away to determine if this refusal to comply with federal law violates the terms of his supervised release.
The probation officer apparently got notified today, but Blankenship tells me that he already gave the PO a heads up, and he laughed at the charge that a financial disclosure not yet filed could possibly disqualify him or get him arrested. He says the PO compared it to a late credit card payment. Dana.
Peter, you get all the best assignments. Thanks for bringing us that report. We appreciate it. And we have much more in all the big primary contests tomorrow. Watch this.
I believe at the end of this day, Nancy Pelosi will not be Speaker. Republicans will keep the majority, not because we want it to happen, because what we have achieved.
So how are races in 4 key states shaping up? Chris Stirewalt is on deck. And new tough talk from North Korea, what the regime is saying and how it could impact an upcoming summit between the president and Kim Jong-un. Plus, we are awaiting the White House briefing when we will bring it to you live as soon as Sarah Sanders steps to the podium. Midterm Monday, and GOP voters in 4 key states, Indiana, West Virginia, North Carolina, and Ohio, are heading to the polls tomorrow for primaries as the Republicans try to hold on to their majorities in Congress. Joining me now, Chris Stirewalt, Fox News politics editor and editor of Halftime Report. It was just 6 days ago that Fox News hosted a debate in West Virginia for the Republicans who are vying to take on Joe Manchin, the Democratic incumbent senator. And tell me about what's happened since then, because all of a sudden this morning we got a tweet from President Trump that says, to the great people of West Virginia, we have together a really great chance to keep making a big difference. Problem is, Don Blankenship, currently running for Senate, can't win the general election in your state. No way. Remember Alabama. Vote Representative Jenkins or Attorney General Morrissey! Exclamation point. So he weighed in.
Well, he half-weighed in. He said, and I was caused to think about what people like Mitt Romney and so many others did with Trump in 2016 when they said, whatever you do, don't vote for this guy. And they said, well, for whom should we vote? And he said, well, I don't care, just not him. And you know how that worked out. If the president was really serious about wanting to stop Blankenship, probably should have picked, right? Probably should have said, but he knew he didn't want to pick because both of the other two were flawed in their own ways. Jenkins is probably a better general election candidate, I guess, than Morrissey is, but he is also a more establishmentarian figure, which would upset folks. And then on the other hand, Morrissey looks like he would have a tougher pull than Jenkins against Manchin, and it's a difficult choice, so he chose not to choose. As a consequence, Blankenship probably is helped in the sense that if the support drives off in both directions and Blankenship can keep his solid core, then maybe he can still pull it off.
And then what, if the president says, remember Alabama, and certainly Blankenship might remember Alabama, and that Roy Moore was expected not to be able to win that primary, or the president said that he wanted him not to, but he did anyway. And then the president, in a controversial move that we've all talked about for a long time, endorses Roy Moore, and Roy Moore ends up losing. So the president could change his mind, and perhaps people that support Blankenship, who want somebody just different to go in there and fire up Washington, maybe they're realizing that the president will come around if he has to.
I'm sure he would. I'm sure that if they nominated Blankenship, that the Republican, and look, if the Republicans could get behind somebody who was credibly accused on multiple occasions of sexual misconduct towards teenage girls, I assume that they could find it within themselves to come around for a fellow who was convicted of white-collar crimes, though they were connected ultimately to a very tragic incident. I suspect if they can come around for Roy Moore, they could come around for Blankenship. The other thing here is this is an unfair comparison. Blankenship is not Roy Moore.
Right.
Roy Moore couldn't win, as it would turn out, the Alabama general election. There is no reason to think that Don Blankenship would do substantially worse than either of the other two. In fact, I don't think either of the other two have made a conclusive case that they are the best nominee for the general election. I think the White House here is probably overcooking the broth a little bit, might have been better off just to let this one play out on its own.
And then take us over to North Carolina. I want to read you a quote from Steve Bannon, one of our old friends. He's in Politico today saying about the midterm elections, you've got to make it an up or down vote November 6th. I want Trump on the ticket in every district. You have to put Donald Trump on the ticket. You're not voting for Congress, you're voting for Donald Trump. This is something that usually presidents in their first midterms try to distance themselves and say this is not a referendum on the president, this is a referendum on Congress, but Bannon is suggesting the exact opposite of that. Good strategy or no?
Yeah, I assume that that's comments like that are why Steve Bannon is making that phone call from an undisclosed location somewhere deep in the political wilderness. You cannot have Donald Trump be the deciding issue in every race. Now, there are some districts where absolutely Republicans want to make it about Trump. If you're in West Virginia, where the president probably has a 70% job approval rating, absolutely you want it to be a referendum on Trump. But in a lot of the districts, particularly the dozens of districts where the president is not particularly popular and Republicans are fighting control of the House, they want to talk about tax cuts. They want to talk about issues. They want to talk about those things. They don't want it to be a referendum on Trump, because if it becomes a referendum on Trump, what the Democrats are immediately able to say is, send me to Washington so that I can put a check on this runaway presidency. It has worked in many cycles in the past. It would work again for them this time. They have to pick and choose where you use the president and where you keep him at a distance.
So we've talked about West Virginia, Indiana, and Ohio the past couple of weeks. We haven't really talked about North Carolina and the 9th congressional district. What's happening there, and are Republicans in danger of possibly having another sort of Connor Lamb moment down there?
It's possible. What is remarkable about this primary, you have an incumbent Republican U.S. member of Congress, very, very conservative people down there. Not those people, but some other people are very conservative. Robert Pittenger is a very conservative member of Congress. You would never think that he would get out-conservatived. But what's happening down there is a vicious primary where you could end up with an incumbent U.S. member of Congress, member of the United States Congress, get knocked out over who loves Donald Trump the most. So that's the kind of district, in fact, where Steve Bannon's quite right. That's where you want to be the Trumpiest Trumper of all the Trumps.
But is that true in the general election as well? I mean, I know that it's true in the primary.
In that district, probably yes. I think in Pittenger's district, I don't think you can probably be too Republican.
All right. That's good to know. All right, Chris Stirewalt, thank you.
You bet.
And we are live at the White House awaiting the briefing with Sarah Sanders. We'll take you there live. Plus a volcano eruption on the Big Island of Hawaii. Now a river of lava on the move. The latest on this unfolding disaster. Fox News alert on the disaster unfolding on Hawaii's Big Island, where a powerful volcano shows no sign of slowing down as it spews lava, destroying dozens of homes and sparking evacuations. William LaJeunesse is live on the Big Island of Hawaii. William, tell us what it's like there. It looks horrible.
Yeah, well, the conditions are pretty bad. about a mile away from where I'm at right now. Police will not let us into that subdivision. But you remember, we had 2 major earthquakes last week in this area, and there have been multiple eruptions since then from the Kilauea volcano. In this one neighborhood, we got some pictures. We got in yesterday for a brief period of time. There's a mandatory evacuation underway, but they allowed people in to pick up a few items, and this is what it looks like. You can see some houses are on fire. Others have been swallowed up by the lava. Some 700 homes are built right on top of a rift zone. It's about 25 miles downslope from the summit, or the crater, if you will, the top of Kilauea, and it is sending millions of tons of red-hot magma down through these underground tubes, and it's venting out literally at the subdivision. So there are about 10 active eruptions going on right now. The one that you're looking at is about twice as long as a football field. We talked to residents as they return from that burned out neighborhood, their trucks filled with medications, appliances, pets, papers, you name it. Some homes are gone, others remain untouched.
My house is about 200 yards from the initial eruption. Okay. On lower Kahukai Street.
Are you optimistic?
Absolutely. Madam Pele is going to do her thing. And so we'll come back when she lets us.
We left all the tools, electronics, all this stuff. You know, that's just materialistic, but...
So the official count, 26 homes destroyed, another 38 structures, if you will, total. Now, we went to a Red Cross shelter, about 200 people there sleeping there each night. You know, they, unlike many disasters, a hurricane or tornado, it's over, they get rescue, recover, rebuild. Not this one. People have no idea when or how it will end for them.
What's going to happen? What's going to happen with us? You know, if we lose our farm, we don't know where we're going to go. You lose your income and you lose your home at the same time.
So the evacuation data remains in effect. People are worried about more earthquakes. There were 152 small ones in a 2-day period. You've got more eruptions possible. And then, of course, you have that sulfur dioxide gas, which can burn your lungs, your eyes, and irritate. So they're keeping people out of there. And, of course, we have no idea when this will end. Back to you.
All right, William, thank you so much. The Trump administration stepping up pressure on Venezuela. Vice President Mike Pence expected to announce new sanctions and call for a delay in the country's elections set to take place in about 2 weeks. This happening as Venezuela plunges deeper in economic chaos, sparking protests against the government amid shortages of basic goods. The move's part of a coordinated effort by the Trump administration to isolate President Nicolas Maduro, who is accused of corruption and human rights abuses. The White House briefing is expected to get underway any minute at a critical stage in trade talks between the U.S., Mexico, and Canada, why a new deal is needed in just the next few days. Plus, the push to confirm President Trump's CIA nominee. An update on the Senate showdown. That's next.
She's done many jobs, including acting director now and deputy director before that. She's just perfectly qualified. I think you have to really make things up to come up with a reason why you wouldn't want her to run the agency.
The White House briefing just now underway. Here's Sarah Sanders.
Since the president's election, more than 3 million jobs have been created. The president's historic tax cuts, deregulation, and pro-growth policies are creating jobs and restoring confidence in America's economy. On another important matter, the White House has been in close contact with state and local officials in Hawaii since the initial earthquake and volcanic eruption. The president continues to monitor the ongoing situation. FEMA and the White House encourage all individuals in potentially affected areas to monitor local radio or TV stations for updated emergency information and follow the instructions of state and local officials. The New York Post said today that CIA Acting Director Gina Haspel has headed 4 CIA stations across the globe, been a senior official in the CIA's Russia operation, held several top roles in the division responsible for covert operations, and post 9/11 was a senior level supervisor in counterterrorism. The Post further noted that her integrity and significantly her political impartiality are unchallenged. She deserves quick confirmation without partisan theatrics. The bottom line, Acting Director Haspel has an unparalleled understanding of the CIA and is the right person to lead it during these dangerous times. Lastly, and on a slightly lighter note, I would like to congratulate Catherine and Alex, 2 members of the White House Press Corps, on their engagement over the weekend. So congratulations. And with that, I don't know if they even showed up today, but that's okay. Definitely would have given them a question, but since I don't see them, Kevin, we'll go with you.
Thank you, Sarah. A couple questions. First on Gina Haspel. Is it true the president and yourself and others had to sort of convince her not to withdraw her name from consideration? And if so, what was that like? And has this circumstance happened before since you've been at your position here at the White House? And a follow-up about Don Blankenship. Why does the president believe he can't win an election in the state of West Virginia?
Let me answer the first question, we'll come back to that. In regards to Acting Director Haspel, her commitment to the agency is one of the reasons that she is the right person to lead it. She wants to do everything she can to make sure the integrity of the CIA remains intact, isn't unnecessarily attacked, and if she felt that her nomination would have been a problem for that and for the agency, then she wanted to do everything she could to protect the agency. At the same time, she wants to do everything she can to protect the safety and security of Americans, which is why she is 100% committed to going through this confirmation process and being confirmed as the next leader of the CIA.
And the follow was on Blankenship in West Virginia. Why does the president believe that he can't win an election in the state of West Virginia? Why not?
As you all know, I have a few more limitations than the president, and due to the Hatch Act, can't get into the specifics about an election prior to it taking place. But I'd refer you back to the president's tweet, which I think is pretty clear. And if he has more to say on it, he certainly will.
Thanks, Sarah. We also congratulate Alex and Catherine. Rudy Giuliani said that if necessary, it's possible that Michael Cohen could have paid off other women to keep them quiet about alleged affairs with the president. Is that possible? Are there other women out there who receive money from the president to stay quiet?
I'm not aware of any other activity, but I would refer you to Rudy Giuliani to respond to any of those questions, or anybody else on the president's outside counsel.
You've been in his circle for a long time now. You were on the campaign. Is that anything that came across your desk?
Again, I'm not aware of anything like that, but I would refer you to the president's outside counsel. Steve?
The president's got a May 12th deadline on the Iran nuclear deal. Is he wavering on this deal based on the pressure from the Europeans with Boris Johnson here this week?
The president will make an announcement on what his decision is soon. As you know, he's got a few days to do that, and we'll let you know when he's ready to make a decision on it.
John Kerry's shadow diplomacy, how does that impact the deliberations?
I don't think it impacts it at all. I think the president spoke out about that pretty clearly, and I don't think that we would take advice from somebody who created what the president sees to be one of the worst deals ever made. I'm not sure why we would start listening to him now. John?
Thank you, Sarah. Back to Gina Haspel. Her confirmation hearing is on Wednesday. It's an open hearing before the Senate Intelligence Committee. Are there any questions that are off limits from the White House's point of view as it relates to her career at the CIA?
We think that Acting Director Haspel is a highly qualified, uniquely positioned individual to lead the CIA, and we're very confident in her ability to answer the questions that we know are going to come. And if you don't believe me, listen to some of the quotes from a lot of other people that have been very outspoken in her support, in their support for her. Former Director Leon Panetta said, "I'm glad it's Gina because frankly, she is someone who really knows the CIA inside and out." Former Director Michael Hayden said Haspel is the absolute best choice to be director. Former Acting Director and Deputy Director Michael Morrell said she is capable, she has integrity, she cares deeply about the mission of the agency, and she cares deeply about the men and women of the agency. And lastly, former Acting Director and Deputy Director John McLaughlin said, "If you were picking a professional officer to head the agency, I can't think of a better person than Gina." We want her to get a fair hearing, a thorough hearing, and we're very confident that not only will all of the members of the Senate see what the rest of us see, and certainly even some of the people that have held that position see, but that Gina is more than qualified to run and lead the agency.
So Sarah, if she's asked any questions regarding enhanced interrogation techniques that took place during her tenure at the CIA that Democrats say that she was involved with, she can answer them fully in an open hearing. Is that your position?
I'll let her address those questions as they come, but as we've said, we think all of the issues surrounding her record, her experience will be brought up, and we're fully confident in her ability to answer those questions. Steve?
Yes, Sarah. President Putin in Moscow was inaugurated today for a new 6-year term. Over the weekend throughout Russia, we saw police arresting, it's estimated, about 1,600 anti-Putin demonstrators, including organizer and anti-corruption campaigner Alexei Navalny. We've seen the president tweet about other Russia matters today, but not about either of these things. What message does the president have for the Kremlin and the Russian people about these events?
First, the president congratulates him and looks forward to a time when we can hopefully have a good relationship with Russia. However, the United States believes that everyone has a right to be heard and assemble peacefully. Blake?
Sarah, thank you. The president has said in the past that the Russia investigation is an excuse for Democrats losing the 2016 election, but today he appeared to look forward to the 2018 midterms and tweeted out, quote, "Is this phony witch hunt going to go on even longer so it wrongfully impacts the midterm elections, which is what the Democrats always intended," and he ended that with a question mark. Does the president now believe that the Russia investigation actually has to do with the 2018 midterms as well?
I think he thinks that the idea that this narrative continues to be driven, the fact that a year and a half later, after spending most all of your time every single day looking into this and still finding nothing, the fact that we're still talking about it will and has the potential to impact the 2018 election. I think the point he's making is how ridiculous it is that we're still having this conversation and the depths to which this research has gone on and investigation has been conducted and still produced nothing.
Is the president pleased with the appearances of Rudy Giuliani over the last few days?
I didn't speak with him specifically about his feelings about it, but certainly feels that he's an added member, added value member to his outside special counsel. Francesca.
Thank you, Sarah. On that note, Rudy Giuliani said yesterday that the president could plead the Fifth if he's subpoenaed by the special counsel. And I want to know why the president would even go that route if he hasn't done anything wrong, as he said repeatedly that there was no collusion and there was no obstruction of justice.
That's a question you'd have to ask the outside special counsel. I'm not an attorney, certainly couldn't address that.
Okay,
Jim?
sorry, Sarah.
Sorry, I'm going to keep moving just because we're going to get real tight on time here. Jim?
In the same vein, does the president believe it is within his executive powers to reject a subpoena from the special counsel's office?
That's a question I would refer you to special counsel.
Can I follow up on Gina Haspel?
I'm going to just keep moving because I did it to your colleague. David?
The president, this time around on Iran, Mike Pompeo, Secretary of State, and we've got John Bolton, your National Security Advisor. They've been among the most prominent critics of the Iran deal. I mean, is there any reason to think President Trump won't kill the deal when Saturday rolls around?
The president will make that announcement very soon. We'll certainly keep you all posted on it as it happens. Michael?
On the EPA, Andrew Wheeler has been now confirmed as the second in command of the EPA. Does the president think that he would be able to continue the deregulatory agenda that Mr. Pruitt has been in charge of, were he to remove Mr. Pruitt? And given the sort of cascade of ethical problems, how close is, what's the status of the review that you guys have been saying that you're doing, and is the president closer to removing Mr. Pruitt from office?
I don't have any personnel announcements on that front. Certainly, we have confidence in the number two. Otherwise, the president wouldn't have asked him to serve at such a senior level position within the EPA, but I don't have anything further on that front. Justin?
I wanted to catch back up with on China after the delegation came back. Presuming that the president's had some sort of briefing on that interaction now, can you tell us his reaction to the talks that happened, if the U.S. plans to talk to China again before the May 22 public comment deadline, and what the sort of next steps are?
Sure. The president had a briefing this morning with members of the team that traveled. The president has a great relationship with President Xi, and we are working on something that we think will be great for everybody. China's top economic advisor, the vice premier, will be coming here next week to continue the discussions with the president's economic team, and we'll keep you posted as those discussions are ongoing. Stephen.
Sarah, in its front page story this morning, the Washington Post, among many things, reported that there are persistent rumors that Mrs. Trump does not live in this White House and that she lives with her parents somewhere in the suburbs. What do you make of those rumors?
I make of the fact that just when you think the Washington Post can't get things any more wrong, they do, and that is an outrageous and ridiculous claim. The First Lady lives here at the White House. We see her regularly, and I think that's something that belongs in tabloid gossip, not on the front pages of the Washington Post, and I hope that they'll do better next time. Peter?
Sarah, we're going to hear from the First Lady in a moment. She's going to promote, among other things, good behavior among children. Part of this effort has to do with cyberbullying right now. Does the President accept any responsibility for American skepticism that the First Lady from the White House would be speaking out against cyberbullying?
Look, this is something that is extremely important to the First Lady. I'm not going to get ahead of her announcement or her comments. In fact, I'm only going to take one last question because we got to make sure that we get there so nobody misses that. And the President will also be joining the First Lady at that event, and so we want to make sure everybody has a chance to tune in. Aisha, we'll take your question last.
To be clear, the question was about him, not about her. I know that we'll wait to hear what she says, but does he accept responsibility for this climate that exists right now, that there is the need to sort of address an issue like cyberbullying?
I think the idea that you're trying to blame cyberbullying on the President is kind of ridiculous when it comes to kids. This is something that has been problematic and something that we have seen over the last decade, and the First Lady sees it to be an important issue and something that she wants to address, and she'll do that here shortly. Aisha.
Thanks, Sarah. There have been some reports that an Israeli intelligence firm was hired to kind of dig up dirt on former Obama administration officials regarding the Iran nuclear deal. Does the White House have any knowledge of that, or the idea that any Trump aides were involved in hiring this intelligence firm?
I'm not aware of anything on that front. If something comes up, we'll let you guys know. Thanks so much. We hope you'll join us here in the Rose Garden with the First Lady and the President rolling out her initiatives. Thanks, guys.
All right, that was Sarah Sanders with her briefing on a Monday. We used to call those a hodgepodge briefing, lots of different topics. And I'm joined by Charlie Hurt, the opinion editor for the Washington Times and a Fox News contributor, and Stephen Sigmund. He's a Democratic strategist and senior vice president of Global Strategy Group. And they were with me while we watched that hearing today. We're waiting on some new video from Senator Manchin and Gina Haspel. She's the president's CIA nominee. And as soon as we have that, we'll bring it to you. What I wanted to start with, Charlie, let me start with you. The president didn't have to choose to have this fight with Gina Haspel. I mean, she was going to be controversial just because she has this long history at the CIA. I think from his perspective, he feels like he's got his finger on the pulse of the American people, that they want to be tough on terrorists, and that he thinks anybody who doesn't want her to be the CIA director because she was tough on terrorists would be probably walking down the wrong path.
Yeah, as in so many cases with this president, I think that what we're seeing is the fact that he does want to have a fight, and he wants to have this fight with these people on this particular issue, and I think it's a gamble. I mean, I think ultimately she will succeed because they don't need any Democrats or Rand Paul for her to get out of committee, and then when it gets to the floor, I think that she'll ultimately be approved. But it's a great fight for Trump to have, especially when you have it juxtaposed to all of these huge things going on, like the North Korea negotiations, like Iran, where all he has to say is, why can't I have my foreign policy team in? Why can't I have the most important person on hand who's going to tell us whether Iran is actually building nuclear weapons behind closed doors?
So Charlie thinks it's a good fight for the president to have. Stephen, do you think it's a good fight for the Democrats to have from their perspective to try to push back against her?
Look, I don't think there's going to be I don't think there would have been a big fight over this, right? I mean, I think in a confirmation hearing there will be and would have been legitimate questions about her tenure at the CIA, but you also have, John Brennan and James Clapper and Mike Morrell, all critics of Donald Trump, who are saying she's qualified and should be the CIA director, right? So I disagree a little bit with Charlie in that it's a fight he wants to have, but he seems to want to have these fights just to appeal to his base, right? Which is why he still has a 40% approval rating, even when things are
he wins that base over and over again.
Right, he can win that base. He doesn't have a problem with that base. But what it creates for the rest of the country is a sense of messiness, right? This continued messiness with his administration. They didn't have to. The White House called her in on Friday. They didn't have to do that. They either scared her a little bit, or she went and,
Well, I think
called
what
their
I
bluff.
imagine that happened is she went there and they said, let's just go over a few more things that you could probably be asked about. And she, according to the Washington Post, said, you know, I'm worried about the integrity of the agency. I don't want the agency to be hurt by this, so I'm willing to step out. But I sort of feel like that the Democrats are really barking up the wrong tree here. Listen to Ron Wyden. He was on MSNBC earlier talking about her.
The fact is, in America, there are scores and scores of well-qualified women who can fill key national security posts like this. And I think it's really insulting to women to say that Gina Haspel is the only one qualified for this job.
Okay, that one really got to me, because to me, the insult is coming again to Gina Haspel, saying
exactly.
she's been there 33. She's dedicated her entire career
She's not a
to public
politician.
service. You know, her first day on the job in counterterrorism was September 11th, 2001. She asked to be transferred to that area. So Ron Wyden is saying is that, oh, there's plenty of women that could do this.
And Ron Wyden has a lot of good questions to raise with her, talking about these black sites and talking about, you know, real legitimate civil liberty questions that I wish he would stick to. This is not one of them. This is just stupid.
But that's true of the White House as well, right? The White House has been going around all day saying if you don't support this nomination, then you're not a feminist like you're supposed to. Right? It's a silly argument for both of them to be having. The argument ought to be.
Can you remember that the next time Democrats?
Well, they just did. I said it was a silly argument for Wyden to be having too. Look, it is legitimate for her to go and face tough questions in a confirmation hearing. It's what that's what ought to be happening, and that's what ought to be happening here. And the Trump White House should have left it at that, frankly, instead of having, you know, more messiness. You know, you already got Rudy Giuliani over the weekend creating God knows what, and adding this to it is like.
Oh, Stephen, you want to stay for another panel, apparently. I listened to an interview over the weekend with Mike Hayden. He was the CIA director, who said that if you are worried about President Trump and you're concerned about him, Gina Haspel is the exact person you should want to have as your CIA director. So. There you have it. I'm glad you were here to watch the briefing with me and to comment, as usual. All right, Charlie Hurd and Stephen Sigmund, thanks for being here. The deadline fast approaching for President Trump to decide if the U.S. will pull out of the Iran nuclear deal. The president just announcing he will make the announcement at 2 p.m. tomorrow. This show could not be at a better time. What could happen if he decides to tear it up? Historian John Meacham joins me next.
The president has been right to call attention to it. But you've got to do that without just throwing the baby out with the bathwater, without scrapping the whole thing. Because if you do that, you have to answer the question, what next?
Fox News alert President Trump saying he will announce his decision on the Iran deal at 2 p.m. Eastern Time tomorrow. The president making the announcement on Twitter. Where else? Moments ago. And I'm joined now by the author of the new book, The Soul of America, Pulitzer Prize-winning presidential historian John Meacham, who I just saw at the Barbara Bush funeral, and of course your eulogy was very touching and wonderful. You've written a new book, The Soul of America, but I do want to ask you about this news that the president is expected to make tomorrow. Iran has been a thorn in America's side for a long time. You've seen presidents try to deal with it.
Since we're approaching the 30th anniversary of the 1979 revolution.
That's right. And so at this point, the president looking like he will probably make a decision to leave. We don't know that for sure, but listen to what President Macron said yesterday. Oh, it's a quote. Sorry, excuse me. You know, he is a good-looking guy. I can't do a French accent, but there he is. That would mean opening Pandora's box. It could mean war. I don't believe that Donald Trump wants war. I don't believe that any president wants war. And last week we had Secretary Rice here, and she said that she thinks pulling out would not be that big a deal. In the realm of history, how big a deal is this?
Well, it ultimately depends on what the reaction is. The one issue is President Obama's legacy was always going to be judged in part on Iran, this deal. If Iran became nuclearized, then if the deal failed, then it was going to be a serious mark. But, you know, as you know, because you've been in the arena, people have to trust the government's word from administration to administration. And so I think it will be destabilizing. I suspect, as with a lot of President Trump, he may bark a bit louder than he bites. And so it wouldn't surprise me if he finds some middle course here.
This also happens to be at the same time that the president is, apparently they have chosen a date and a location not announced yet for the summit with North Korean leader Kim Jong-un. And just how important is it for these summits to be set up in a way that just downplays expectations?
Well, hugely. Summits, you know, the professionals hate summits because it's the natural characteristic of a political leader to think they can charm anyone. They wouldn't be political leaders if they didn't think that. During World War II, the Allies used to hate it when Roosevelt and Churchill got together because they would have a couple of martinis and decide to do something. But what links both these stories is the most, except for the possibility of one of these weapons reaching terrorist hands, this is the most serious national security challenge any president faces. It's kind of remarkable that since 1945 there's not been a greater proliferation. Oppenheimer and Einstein both thought that once this genie was out of the bottle you could never put it back in. And these leaders who are urged to give them up think about Gaddafi. Gaddafi disarmed, and Gaddafi ended up being dragged through the streets, which is not what a lot of despots want to end up doing.
Well, John Meacham, I took a look quickly at the Soul of America, your new book. It is called The Battle for Our Better Angels, and I understand it's quite optimistic, so that is always a good thing to be able to read. We hope you'll come back.
Thank you.
All right. That's John Meacham, everybody. Now look at this little guy. What's he working on? We're going to tell you next.